Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Field Engineer channel. Our talk today will be an interview with Kevin Mace. Kevin joined the Field Engineer community in April of 2023. He lives in Switzerland, and he holds the position of Vice President of Global Installations at Varian, which is a Siemens Healthineers company. After having been a field engineer in the radar industry and then joining Varian, he continuously progressed at Varian for more than 20 years into the present role that he holds and that he held for more than 3 years now. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you for taking the time. So we're going to get into it right away. My first question to you, Kevin, is to tell us a little bit about yourself, your choice of studies and career, what got your interest in this field?
Okay, so I guess my career started back in 1988. I joined the military back in the UK. I joined the Royal Air Force, primarily as a radar engineer or an airfield engineer working on radars and everything in air traffic control. Before progressing over the course of 13 years into kind of a third line PSC type role, advanced troubleshooting, repairs, and servicing at a global level. So I did that for around 13 years. And then I didn't really have much in the way of qualifications, but I had a lot of technical experience. But I made the decision to leave the military back in 2001, and I made the leap into a civilian career. And I joined Varian. Actually, they were the 10th company that I interviewed with. I had 7 job offers on the table, but Varian was the one that I really, really wanted to join. They were working on state-of-the-art linear accelerators used for cancer care and radiotherapy. And it was kind of a natural stepping stone from engineering on radars and electronics and linear accelerators. They use very similar technology. So it was kind of a natural step. And there's a lot of ex-military working in this field today. So I made that jump and I joined as a service engineer. So back in 2001, doing troubleshooting, routine maintenance, but also installation work. We didn't have a dedicated installation team back then. So you did a bit of everything. You could be away from home for 5-6 weeks at a time, and then have a few kind of single day jobs all over the UK. And then I progressed through various management levels. After that, ended up where I am today. I live in Switzerland now. I've been here for 11 years, and I now lead a global installation team. So that was formed about 18 years ago. I've been involved in it for most of that time, and I'm very fortunate these days to head that team globally. It's about 500 people right now, and we're responsible for installing all of the linear accelerators, all of the associated software and other smaller hardware upgrades that we use in the field around the world. For studies, like I said, I didn't really have much in the way of paper qualifications either when I joined the military or when I left. So I started an open university degree towards the end of my Air Force career, mainly to give myself something to do whilst I was winding down, ready to leave. And then I finished it off after I joined Varian. It took me 6 years in total, and it was a mix of subjects around digital communications, advanced mathematics, things I thought would help me with emerging technology at the time. So that really got me in the mindset for my love of learning and trying to develop myself, and stood me in good grounds for as I progressed through my career, I would say.
Quite an interesting story. Going from military to medical devices. Not that it is uncommon. We see it a lot here, especially in the US. How was your experience going from the military radar into medical devices and the civil field?
It was interesting. It didn't feel like there was so much pressure leaving the military. Yeah, it was a fairly easy transition, I would say. I mean, I joined Varian on my first day. They gave me a car, they gave me a mobile phone, they gave me a laptop, and these are all things I'd never had before. And I thought it was an amazing company to join at the time. And then I started learning about the equipment, and that was challenging. I spent a lot of time in the US in my first year. So it was a relatively easy transition, I would say, because I just loved it. I loved all the new challenges. It seemed like a very kind of caring company. I think moving into healthcare, they really cared about the employees. So it was a relatively easy transition. And, I already had ex-military friends who were in Varian at the time and continue to this day. There's 6 or 7 guys I used to work with in the Air Force that are still working in Varian in the UK. And like you say, in the US particularly, we have a lot of ex-military people around there. So there's a lot of similar mindsets and attitudes to how we do work. But there's also, military guys tend to be fairly stubborn and focused and outspoken as well. So you see a lot of that, particularly within the service engineer environment as well, which is quite interesting to manage, particularly sometimes. There's not many shrinking violets in this field, I would say.
Very
But
true.
yeah, but it was the transition for me was fairly easy. I think I was ready to leave the military.
Mhm.
And I was ready for something slightly different. So moving into healthcare was a complete change, but I've never regretted it to this day.
Nice. I'm curious about languages. What languages do you speak?
I speak possible English, being British. My German, it depends who you speak to where I live, but I can read and write German to a reasonable level. I can understand it to a semi-reasonable level, but speaking it is still one of my weak points. That's something I'm going to start working on again next year. But yeah, it's a little bit of French, but mainly on the understanding side. But yeah, I'm kind of your stereotypical Brits that we kind of struggle with languages once we move abroad. And I'm very fortunate that we're in an English-speaking company, especially where I live in Switzerland. The main language here is English, and it kind of puts you to shame some days. The number of languages Swiss people speak living here, it's incredible. But it's definitely not one of my strengths, I would say.
Mhm. But still, you speak some French and some German, and that's a great asset.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Kevin, after having been for so many years with the same company and going through the ranks, we're going to talk about that a little bit later to, for the field engineers to benefit from your story. Really, what motivates you every day? What gets you up in the morning?
I think although Varian's an integrated business line in Siemens Healthineers now, Siemens Healthineers is a healthcare company, right? But Varian's focus is still very much on treating cancer and making it a manageable disease. So our mission statement is, to envision a world without fear of cancer. And that's really powerful. That's always resonated with me. I know it resonates with the whole team and everybody who comes to work here, truly takes that to heart and uses that as the motivation to do the best you can do every single day. So it's always been easy for me to focus on the work we do. We work with some really cool technology in some really challenging environments. We install in the majority of countries around the world. Even countries like now where there's some pretty tense political situations, some war zones, you still need to provide healthcare. So every day is a challenge. But the reason that we come to work is because we make people's life better, and that's pretty motivating.
Right. And as you said, your employees take it to heart, and there's no better motivation than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking at your career evolution, you went from field engineer to service coordinator, then you moved up to middle management and top management. How do you see that evolution? How did it happen for you?
I won't say I ever specifically went looking for managerial positions. I didn't have a career mapped out. And I do think I've occasionally been fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. But as I've progressed, with every step up I've taken, I've felt more and more comfortable with the role. There's definitely been cases of imposter syndrome over the years when you take on a new role and you think, am I the right person for this? But then you realize that everyone else at the same level has the same concerns and fears, and a lot of the time people are betraying confidence when they're not really feeling it. And once you get over that, I think it becomes easier to manage. For me, the evolution from engineer to service coordinator was one of the best jobs because I took over kind of the day-to-day running of the department, but without any of the proper managerial responsibility. So I didn't have to approve time cards or expenses or do check-ins or any of this kind of thing. But I ran the department on an operational basis. So it was a really good training on how to work with people and how to make things run. without all the added managerial overhead that comes with that position normally. So it was a really good training period for me. I did that for 3 or 4 years before I became a full, a proper manager, responsible for all those additional general managerial functions. So that was definitely a good step for me. And then I took over a relatively small team of 13, 14 people, and then I took on a region, and then I took on a wider team until I moved into this global role. And each step felt like the right step at the time, and I still had doubts every single time about whether I was the right person or not. But I've learned, as I've got older, I've learned to take risks, measured risks, with some of these positions, and figure, if I don't do it, who is going to do it? So it's good to push outside your comfort zone sometimes, I think, and try something that's you think is a little bit out of your reach. And it's surprising how many times you become more comfortable with that and actually turn out to enjoy it. And then it sets you up for the next step, I think.
Right. And it's a very logical progression how you learn to do the service coordination before you went
Yeah.
into managing a team. It's a nice progression for sure. Looking at teams, what skills do you look for in service and support teams? And what are the competencies that make an excellent field engineer, in your opinion?
I think there's a couple of main things. One is the ability to learn. Like I said, I didn't have much in the way of paper qualifications. That came to me later. I was never good at school. I dropped out of college. I didn't really have much. I joined the military with the bare minimum. And I didn't discover my love of learning until I was, almost in my 30s, and I think people go through different stages of their life when they're ready to do certain things. So for me, education came late. But I think if you have the ability to learn on the job, to learn something, if people take the time to teach you and you have the ability to learn, I think that's critical. And then the other big piece for me is building relationships. I think if you can build your credibility through making relationships, it can cover up any educational deficiencies you may have. And I'm a big believer in you can pick the right person for the role. They don't necessarily have to be qualified for that role, but they should be trainable. So I think if you can learn and you can build those relationships to sustain you whilst you're learning and for the rest of your career, then it'll be okay for you. One of my very best installation engineers has 0 qualifications. We took him on. He used to do some work for us outside the company. We brought him in, gave him a basic technical job, and then we give him some internal training, on-the-job training, and full support. And he's now one of our best installers, even though he has no paper qualifications. So to me, education is important. If it's right for you at that time, get those qualifications and then apply them. But equally, if you don't have them, that there's so many different avenues to get the experience these days. I think it's a much more versatile working world now. There's a lot of different paths to get to where you want to go to.
Very true. And it's an interesting story how you started without education and then military gave you the opportunity to discover that you like learning. And we hear more and more these days that diplomas don't necessarily make or break. It's really what the person can learn, what the person can do. And you are a proof of that. What do you consider the most satisfying and the most challenging parts of managing a team? And how did you maintain a work-life balance throughout your career?
I'm not going to claim I've balanced it throughout my career, but I think the most satisfying thing is definitely seeing the impact of the work. So, we take machines, we deliver them to hospitals, and then they treat cancer patients with them. So, typically it takes around a year on average to project manage and deliver a machine, to install it, to test it, hand it over to a customer. It's quite a long time. But when at the end of the year, after the customer's fully tested it and they treat their first patient, that's pretty motivating. So seeing, we do a large volume of these every year and then all the software that goes with it. So seeing that being used, using the latest technology, the latest advanced treatments to help cure cancer, I mean, there's nothing better than that. So for me, that's definitely the most satisfying part of the job. I think the most challenging part is trying to keep people engaged in the modern business environment. There's so much pressure, particularly around the financial perspectives. publicly traded companies have a duty to shareholders to make profit, and trying to balance that. So trying to manage upwards on the financial pressure, but also trying to manage downwards and keep the engagement of the teams there. So, they're still motivated and want to keep working. I think that's probably the most challenging piece right now. And to offer long-term careers to people. There's people who want to grow their careers, there's people who want to earn more money, and trying to balance all of that because companies don't have finite resources, right? We can't promote everybody. Not everyone has a fast career track. So trying to balance everybody's needs and be as fair as possible and keep people engaged, I think, is probably the hardest part of the job right now.
Right. And you're right. The times have changed. We don't live in the same world anymore.
No.
And for you, looking back at your career, do you think you would have done anything differently?
That's a good question. Honestly, I don't think so. I can honestly say every job I've had in Varian and now Siemens, I've loved. Every job I've had has been my favorite job. And then, and that's still true to this day. I love the job I have now. So I don't know if I would do anything differently. I feel like I've maximized a lot of my opportunities. I've been lucky to work for some really good leaders who've mentored me and helped me grow. And without having them at the right time, I don't think I would have got as far as I have. So, I've been allowed to make my own mistakes. I've been allowed to do things that potentially other people haven't been able to do in a company. I've had a little bit of freedom to make some choices, to transform organizations. So I've had that freedom to build and become my own style of leader. So I'm not sure I would go back and change anything if I was honest.
Okay. And back to what you said, it's like sometimes when you look back, it's like the stars are aligned, but truly it is about the talent you proved, you showed, the support you got from your managers who noticed your talent and wanted to tap into it for the benefit of the team and the organization, which is really perfect situation. Some field engineers don't necessarily have the same kind of alignments, but if they were to trigger something like what you lived, what advice would you give them to those field engineers who are still early in their careers and are trying to build their momentum and starting to prove themselves?
I think I'll tell you that the best piece of advice I ever got, it was actually just after I joined Varian. We went to America. We were on an introductory clinical course. And somebody came in and said, if you don't know the answer to something, say that you don't know the answer. Don't try and bluff it. Don't try and work around it. Say you don't know the answer, but then follow up with, I'm going to find someone who does know the answer and get back to you. Right? And I think it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard. And I've kind of stuck to that my whole career because it fills a couple of things. One is you'll learn something new. You'll go and find the answer from somebody who knows and you'll learn something new. But secondly, it builds your credibility as someone you can go to and ask for support, even if it's out of your area or not somewhere you traditionally work in. And I think that really helps build credibility as long as you do the follow-up, as long as you go back to the person every time. And I've tried to make that my mantra. And then in my early days, and this is, I was going to answer the work-life balance thing, but in my early days, I think it was really important, especially as a leader and maybe a new manager, is to be there for your team. So on this same course, I got that piece of advice, and then somebody else came in, and it was the head of global customer service at the time, and he said, if you ever need me, I'm here. My phone's on 24 hours a day. If you need support, you call me and I'll help you. And this was a guy, I was a service engineer. This was the head of global customer services. And he said, you better have a damn good reason why you're calling me if it's early in the morning. But just know I'm here for you. And again, that was, as a new service engineer, that was really powerful for me. So in the early days, I tried to make sure I'm always there for my team. And I still am now. But I work in a different area now, and there's not these 24-hour emergency calls much anymore. But especially when I was a junior manager, I was always there. I felt like I was working 24 hours a day sometimes. But it's important if you're sending people out to work in the field, particularly in some challenging countries or remote locations, that they know there's somebody at the end of the phone they can call for support. It's crucial. And again, it helps build your credibility and confidence with the team. So that brings me back to the work-life balance. I would say the first probably 10, 15 years as when I was a manager, my work-life balance was shocking. But it helped that I was in a job that I loved. It makes it easier to put the extra hours in, to work the weekends, to be away from your family, traveling. If you enjoy the job, if you're in a job, that you're not so happy with, then that becomes more of an issue, and then you have to reassess where you're at. But I've been fortunate the last couple of years, primarily, that I think I've got the work-life balance much better structured, and that was not down to me so much making personal choices, but more about getting my team organizational structure correct. If your team structure is correct, it kind of runs itself. And then you have to make sure that as you progress down the organization, the whole team structure is well aligned and well structured and everybody knows what they're doing. And it actually frees up time for everybody. You have good processes, good people, good organizational structure. So I would say my work-life balance right now is probably the best it's ever been. But it was quite a steep learning curve to get here, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And as you referred to earlier, field engineers need support. It's a lonely job out there. When you're alone, facing customer-facing situation, it's good to know that someone is only a phone call away to support you. It makes a whole lot of difference. So we talked a little bit about the engineers who are early in their career. Now the question is more for field engineers who are mid-career, let's say, and who aspire to advance to management. What is your recommendation to them?
I think you need to think carefully about the motivation for doing that. There's a few reasons why people tend to want to be managers. Are you doing it because you want to lead people? That would be the first question. And the second one is, are you doing it because you want better compensation? And I think you have to weigh all these things up to see, what's the motivation to move into management? Because I think, all the best managers, leaders I've worked with have wanted to be people leaders primarily, I think. So I think the reason why is important. There's a perception out there that managers are paid a lot of money, and the move up automatically entitles you to more compensation, big bonuses, stock, whatever it may be, and everything's rosy. But the reality is, there's trade-offs for all of this. And I think if you're serious about moving into management, you need to understand your motivation why, and you need to accept that it's not necessarily a better move for compensation. If you're a mid to senior level engineer and you're on good overtime, maybe a good incentive, and a high salary for your position, moving into management doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be financially better off, right? And that's the point where you have to decide, am I investing in my future? Maybe you suffer a little short-term financial gain, but what you do is open up a wider path to promotion or to career advancement in the future. Because, as a service engineer, typically you're limited once you reach a level of if you're a subject matter expert, you kind of peak at some point, and then you have to find another speciality or something to continue in the engineer ranks, or you have to move into management. So I think you need to figure out, exactly if management is your thing, are you willing to accept? And these are the difficult conversations I have when I interview service engineers who want to move into management, and you tell them about the reality is actually, well, yeah, your base salary might be a little higher, but your overtime is going to disappear potentially. Some companies protect it, but you may lose your overtime. It's a different incentive plan. Not everybody gets stock. Whatever the benefits are for each company, you need to take that into account and decide, can I handle a little short-term financial pain to advance my career? Are you investing in yourself, and are you doing it for the right reasons? And I think that's probably the most common conversation I have when I interview engineers who want to be managers, and their perception of, well, I'm only going to work 40 hours a week and the pay is going to be fantastic and it's a super easy job. And the reality is that there's trade-offs, right? If you're a junior manager, you tend to work more hours and then it's unpaid overtime, right? So you have to do all this trade-off and analysis. And I would definitely recommend speaking to someone who's been in the role for a few years. and figure out if you're in a company who will invest, because there's other benefits, right? You could enroll in MBA programs or degree programs. There's other benefits that you need to take a look at in the whole package. It's just not about base salary, at that point. So that's kind of the way I look at it. It's one of the earlier conversations I have in the interview process to get their attitude towards why do you want to be a manager? What's the motivation to drive you for it?
Yeah, it's certainly not the money, as you said.
No.
In my experience as a manager, I've seen many field engineers making more money than I was,
Yeah.
simply because of their bonuses and overtime. Overtime is a big component. So the whole compensation package exceeded mine.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
you mentioned about the why, that's really very important. And there's a good book about that by Simon Sinek.
Yes.
Title is Start with Why.
Yeah, exactly.
My last question to you, Kevin, as a manager and coaching your team members, other than what you mentioned, what advice would you give to your field engineers for being coached? How would they or how should they approach coaching?
So for me personally, feedback is extremely critical. I like feedback, whether it's good, bad, constructive, whatever. I really enjoy hearing feedback. And I'm usually fairly quick to respond to it as well. And it's something that was missing from a large part of my early career. I didn't get much in the way of feedback. And then I had specific feedback from one senior leader 1 year, and it was, I don't want to say it was life-changing, but it definitely changed my attitude to how I approach my work. And it helped accelerate me and develop me as a kind of a mid-level manager at that time. So I would definitely ask for feedback. I would also recommend that you find a mentor. If you're a service engineer looking to move into management, go and find yourself a manager and ask them to mentor you. Mentoring is something that's worked really well for me. I enjoy doing it as well. I have several mentees right now within the company, and I really enjoy working with them. And especially now there's a lot of generational gaps in the workplace. And mentoring people from different generations is quite interesting. They have completely different angles of how they look at life and work. And it's really interesting, and it helps me develop as well. So one of the biggest gifts I was given from this company was having a mentor over the years. I've had 2 or 3 now in my time at different seniority levels. And it really does help having that someone with experience to go and ask those questions. How did you handle this scenario? What do you recommend I do here? I have this project, so I don't know where to start. Do you know anybody? All of these things are super critical. And everybody has a best friend outside work, right? If you have a social issue, you go and talk to your best friend. You need to develop a similar kind of professional relationship inside work where you have someone you can go and talk to and ask about work problems. And I think it's critical. And I see the people who have that mentor-mentee relationship doing really well in the company. And then the people who don't have anybody they can go and talk to are struggling to know where to go. How do I get my next step? How do I advance up the career ladder? So that would be, if I could say one recommendation to anybody is go and find yourself a mentor and ask them to help you develop your career.
Very good point. And, thinking back to the days when I was a service engineer, I wish I knew that then to help me advance in my career. Anything you would like to add before we wrap up our talk today?
No, and thank you for the opportunity. It's really nice. I think this is the first time in my career I've actually sat here and talked about my career. So it's been kind of nice for me. And I would say to any aspiring service engineer who wants to get on, there's an awful lot of data out there now, with just Google searching different roles, similar roles with ChatGPT now, all these advances in technology, there's a lot of information out there that can help you either find that next role or develop in your current role. So go and make use of everything that's out there today. And if you want to reach out, I'm more than happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if anybody's looking for advice or wants to understand more about our industry in particular, I'm more than happy to take a call or set up some time and offer some feedback.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much for offering your services to help. It was a great talk. Thank you very much for sharing your time and your experience today with us. It has been a pleasure. To our viewers, I would like to say that we will continue to post similar talks as promised. Please continue to follow this channel and subscribe to be notified of new content, and don't hesitate to submit your suggestions in the field engineer community for specific topics that you would like us to cover. We'll see you later. We're wrapping up the year and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thank you very much.